We enter yet another winner's match, and we find out who between OmegaZero from China and Surrender from South Korea will be advancing to the top 8 and punch their ticket one step closer to a world championship berth. My name is Frodo, and I'm joined on the desk by Brian Gibler, and we get to bring you guys this great best of 5 and a lot of things on the line here for both these players. OmegaZero had quite the unsatisfactory finish, not just earlier this year in the Bahamas, but also in the World Championship last year. And then Surrender, he's got big shoes to fill, not just for himself, but also the expectation of his teammates and all the Western fans.
And both their regions, too. Both China and the Asia-Pacific region don't have as many representatives. In the case of China, none, who are through to the World Championship so far. So far, those two regions are performing very well in this event. So it'll see which of them can be guaranteed to advance to the top 8 already. All
right, well, let's get set for our third winner's match here. Surrender versus OmegaZero.
Let's do this! Surrender versus OmegaZero!
Just in general, looking at the Chinese players, I feel there's a lot of potential. OmegaZero has a lot of exposure in a lot of big tournaments at Hearthstone, and I think he has shown that he is a very good player.
I don't really know much about him, but I think I can beat Surrender.
Surrender versus OmegaZero! Let's rock!
Taking a look at these two players' lineup, a couple of things immediately jump out. One is Murloc Paladin, after the 9.1 balance patch, has discouraged a lot of players from picking up their Murlocs. If you have laid it down to rest, Surrender is sticking to it after it helped him qualify for the summer playoffs after a big win. And OmegaZero is bringing Hunter, even to the point where it's an ambiguous Hunter. We don't actually know what to call it. If it's a fast, aggressive, maybe just a mid-range Hunter. It's just Hunter.
Well, it's the only Hunter in the tournament, so you don't have to really define it. It's just Hunter, the platonic ideal of Hunter.
Yes, well, I guess the important thing is it has Deathstalker X already, which is the only thing I care about, because I want to see some Build the Beast action, but it's got some fast tools. And we're going to kick things off fast and furious. Hunter has made an appearance against Murloc Paladin. While this matchup is going to be exciting to watch, it does tend to favor the Murloc Paladin on paper, but I wonder how much that changes with some of the balance update and specifically their deck list.
Well, there are specific card choices that the Hunter can choose to include that improve their matchup significantly. One of those is Unleash the Hounds. We see that in OmegaZero's opening hand. The ability to get back the board once you have lost it has always been something Hunter has struggled with. But OmegaZero does have that single copy of Unleash the Hounds, which can be very important if Surrender gets out to a quick start with multiple early minions.
Yeah, look at that opening hand here from Surrender. He has the ability to play out and control the board again away from Hunter. So one of the most valuable things for Hunter to do is to have a turn 1 play. But that's often predicated on the idea that you're able to win the board through a turn 1 play. And won't be the case if Surrender's able to get a lot of Murloc snowballing.
One card that is actually missing, speaking of turn 1 plays from Surrender's list compared to many of these decks, is actually Righteous Protector, the 1-drop Divine Shield taunt. Wow. He's instead choosing to include Grimscale Chum, which was standard in these lists prior to the release of Knights of the Frozen Throne. I think a big part of that is the fact that against other aggressive decks, being able to buff up, say, Valve Inquisitor to 4 health or Hydrologist to 3 can be a really big deal to allow you to preserve your board without having to expend extra mana like you essentially have to with the Righteous Protector.
And part of the Righteous Protector, too, came with the entire Corpse Taker package, which has largely been gravitated away from Murloc Paladin. They feel less all-in on, the 4-mana 3/3 Divine Shield, Wind Fury Taunt, and instead balancing it out with, Finja and having these other real nice things with the Curator and Bone Bears as the real meat for the mid-stages of the game.
OmegaZero, though, with a very top-heavy hand. Both copies of Bittertide Hydra, which do not perform very well in this matchup. You're playing against a deck that fights for the board very well early on and can likely crash multiple small minions into it to deal lots of damage, or even just completely neuter its power with Sunkeeper Terra.
Now, I know a lot of people might see that rope from Surrender on turn 1, and he kind of agonized over the Grimscale Chum versus the Valve Inquisitor. So when Surrender chooses to play the Grimscale Chum, a little bit weak, but also has a little bit more power, What's the trade-off, and what is he looking for, really, on OmegaZero's side?
Well, one thing is allowing him to get a larger Vilephan Inquisitor makes it more likely that he'll have future minions live. He doesn't have anything that if he plays the Chum on turn 2 that's going to effectively really answer if OmegaZero were to have played. This way, he's able to bolster his second turn, as well as trade into that Firefly immediately, which the Vilephan Inquisitor could not have done.
Yeah, and I think by doing that, he also gets to stop most of the turn 2 plays if, Crackling Razor Maul comes out, or any kind of thing to challenge the board, and then all of a sudden, Hunter's the one winning the board, and then you never are able to snowball with your Murlocs. So Surrender took a little bit of a risk, but at the same time, he's won the board now for it, and look at how he's rewarded. That Cold Light Seer draw off the top should secure this board here for Surrender.
Yeah, and the move toward Cold Light Seer as previous versions didn't necessarily include it. That's a big part of the reason of playing all of the one-drop Murlocs specifically. So you're able to ensure you have boards that are valuable to buff when you do draw the Seer in the early turns. Because Murloc War Leader no longer gives health, it's pretty important to have health buffs for your early Murlocs to allow them to stay alive in order to snowball with Gentle Megasaur. Both of these decks are kind of trying to do the same thing. They're utilizing tribal synergies, in one case Murlocs, the other case Beasts, and their goal is to try to power up those minions and ride them to victory.
Blessing of Kings is also a great draw here for Surrender, and that's often a crucial card. Turn 4 used to be defined by how big you can really set up for your turn 5 with True Server Champions in the past and other things. But now, these days, the modern Murloc Paladin just wants to use their turns 1, 2, 3 and secure it with big buffs with Blessing of Kings, Spiker Steed, and Bone Mare.
Yeah, we talk about how there are sort of the turns that each of the decks is looking to do something powerful. Turn 4 is one of the big power swing turns of this this Murloc Paladin deck. It has Blessing of Kings, it has Gentle Megasaur. So its goal is to try to establish a strong board on turn 3 to allow it to take the biggest advantage of those buffs that it can get. And OmegaZero has not been able to keep Surrender off the board, so he's able to get this very powerful swing with Blessing of Kings.
And and part of the difficulty, like you mentioned, was winning the board back. And OmegaZero does have Unleashed Hounds with Scavenging Hyena. That is very nice, but will it have as big of an impact as we think? Because Surrender doesn't have a lot of low health minions. Because of that Cold Light Seer, which is one of the cards that we featured, is what differentiates his list from maybe some of the other Murloc Paladins that you used to see.
And I think this is a little bit of what Surrender is trying to do, is trying to ensure that all of his minions are significant threats, and that if OmegaZero does attempt to use Unleash the Hounds to clear things off, or even just a bow or kill command, he still has multiple strong threats spread across his minions.
So if he plays Bittertide Hydra, he has an 8/8. If he Scavenger Hyena's Unleash the Hounds, he removes a 5/3 on board and gets +6/+3 on his Hyena, so that's an 8/5.
Which survives on board.
Which survives on board.
So this is a very big turn. We mentioned how powerful this Unleash the Hounds is in the matchup. Well, it's that much stronger when it is combined with the Hyena to really swing this board back.
I like it. And turn 5 is sometimes a little awkward for the Murloc Paladin. They play Finja or sometimes that Cobalt Scalebane. Neither of them directly answer.
Megasaur, though.
Okay.
There are two options that it can allow either his Murlocs to directly trade if he chooses to play Megasaur this turn. He can either hit +3 attack or Poisonous. +3 attack is the better option, which he finds both. He can choose either. +3 attack is the better option for pushing damage. Poisonous can allow him to potentially answer a Bittertide Hydra with his other surviving Murloc as well. So it depends which thing Surrender wants to decide that he wants to play around.
Oh, it's tempting. The +3 attack, you feel like you can continue to push damage, but that poison is given the information we know. Is probably better if against the Bittertide Hydra to allow him to get trades. Considering that Surrender doesn't have a very good turn 6 right now planned. He's got Hydrologist and a Tyrion that will come down in a few turns.
It's an interesting situation because Surrender has to try and figure out what he can parse from OmegaZero's early plays. OmegaZero didn't really miss a beat during his early turns.
He saved a coin too for a long time.
Right, so there's any number of things that he could have in his hand. There's no way to really definitively figure out, okay, well there's a Bittertide Hydra in his hand. But now he's able to push that damage with the +3 attack, but does not have an answer immediately to the Hydra at least.
Maybe the next best option if Hydrologist can pick up a really good secret to stop this Bittertide Hydra.
Yeah, the Noble Sacrifice would prevent an attack from the Hydra as well as deal damage if it does choose to attack. Repentance could answer the next big thing.
This was an idea thrown out to me by Purple one time, which is you, in some situations, you just do eye for an eye and you like completely throw your opponent off. And he says he actually snap picks it. I think Noble Sacrifice is definitely the right thing. But I was playing with Purple yesterday or 2 days ago, and he's like, why didn't you pick eye for an eye? I was like, I don't know if you're trolling me or you're actually telling me this is a real play here.
We have talked quite a bit about how Purple can make some unusual plays sometimes. But I mean, here, the Noble Sacrifice is kind of like an eye for an eye because it's going to prevent damage as well as deal damage because the attacking minion is in fact a Bittertide Hydra.
True.
OmegaZero could choose to try to prevent damage on his Hydra this turn as well as not trigger the secret with this particular minion by just Houndmaster on his Hydra and no attacks. But that does leave him in a situation it's like, well, Surrender could just attack all his minions into this anyway, so it's a really bad spot.
Yeah, this is a really tough spot. Like, the Bittertide Hydra needs to be pressing damage to the face, can't be trading into minions because you're just going to eternally be behind against a swarm of Murlocs. You're coming up on a turn 2 where you know that if you don't win the board decisively, if your opponent has a Bone Mare, that's also going to be the end of the game.
Yeah, Liak does not do anything.
Yeah.
He can now that he used the bow, he'll get down on this, but I think he's still dead. I think that he can try and clear something with the Hydra, but there's just enough damage remaining on the board that will just eliminate him. And that's it. Surrender takes game number 1 in this aggressive match.
Yeah, Murloc Paladin gets a win. A deck that some people had question marks over. They weren't sure how they performed, but Murloc Paladin, even just by the statistics, very solid deck. You know, the Vicious Syndicate team, they do a great job every week with their meta reports. Even says that it's just underplayed relative to how good it is right now.
I think a big part of the reason you see the Murloc Paladin deck underplayed is because in many cases on ladder, you can play Tempo Rogue to do a very similar sort of thing, but generally do better. But when you're in a tournament environment, it's like, well, you can't play 2 Tempo Rogue decks, you just get the 1.
Well, Surrender's doing well so far, up 1-0 as him, along with fellow countrymen Kokosasa, play with the hopes of the entire nation of Korea resting on their shoulders.
사실 한국이 거의 종주국이라고 할 수 있는
Korea is the heart of the esports scene, and Hearthstone is the most famous game of this genre.
항상 이때까지
So far, every year, there has been a Korean player in the World Championship. But so far this year, no Korean player has qualified.
제가 아니더라도 이런 말 했어요. 사실 코코사스 선수랑
I talked to the other Korean player here in the championships, Kokosasa,
8강에
about
올라오고
how we are the last chance for a Korean to make it to the World Championships.
일단은 서렌더
Because Surrender and myself are in neighbor groups, there's a chance we'll meet in the quarterfinals, and the winner would go on to the World Championship. It's mixed feelings. I really want to go to the Worlds with him, but if it comes down to either him or me, I will put up a fight. But I'll be okay if he beats me and makes it.
둘 다인 것 같아요. 제 생각에는 아무래도
For all international events, I feel like I play for both Korea and myself.
한국 하스톤이
We need to prove that Korea Hearthstone is still a force.
좀 실망할 것 같거든요. 그래서 제가
Back home, there are a lot of people who really want to see a Korean player in the
이런
championship.
말 했어요. 사실 코코사스
I don't want to let them down.
Some insight into Surrender. He's actually been playing in tournaments for quite some time. I remember first seeing him on the stage playing against Tides of Time in 2014's World Esports Championship, where Tides of Time actually won all of his money. I think it was like $30,000 in a silver briefcase and took it home.
All of his money?
Yeah.
All of the money
They
ever
handed him a silver briefcase and said, you know, congratulations.
I didn't know they literally had to take cash out of the country then. It was really quite the ordeal. But no, Surrender is a player who has had kind of a conduit to the Western scene, in part due to that early exposure to Western players in that event, as well as now he's on a team with Zixo and Hoi. Hoi, who was in fact the seasonal championship just last season.
That's right, just a few months ago. And almost to the point where Sixo performs really well in almost every tournament across the world. But he's even just propping up Surrender. He's like, well, Hoi's doing well and Surrender might qualify for Worlds. What am I doing? You can just see that Planet as a team to be feared and why many consider them huge players, not just in individual tournaments, but also T tournaments like the Trinity Series.
And speaking of teams, you know, Surrender talked a little bit about representing his country there. a lot of the Korean players we've spoken to throughout the year on the Hearthstone Championship Tour have talked about how because there is such a passionate esports fan base in Korea, they feel particular pressure to perform for their country and as representatives of Korea. So it'll be interesting to see if that either is motivation or perhaps just added stress for Surrender.
Passionate is underselling. If you watch the Korean major and how that actually concluded, I wish I could have been part of that crowd because it seemed electric just being able to see Moscow versus Maru finals with, you know, the crazy read on the Eater of Secrets and Dirty Rat to finish the quest. If you guys didn't see it, I would highly suggest you go back to the VODs and watch it. It was a heck of a time.
Just watching the Twitch clip from home was exciting.
Yeah,
that's the point. And just hearing the reaction
and the Korean
crowd,
commentators going nuts.
absolutely,
Oh man, it's a great environment. And Surrender says he wants to live up to that, so we'll see if he can actually live up to the expectation. Now let's dial in also a little bit here. One person I want to call out of note is Stan Sifka, and he actually did a little bit preview on some of the forums prior to today, and he actually called out specifically OmegaZero for saying that he's not sure. He thinks he's a good player, but his lineup's very weak, given that he brought Hunter, but more specifically that he avoided bringing Jade Druid. What are your thoughts on Aggro Druid now that we've seen it perform a couple times with OmegaZero and here now?
It's really interesting because the Aggro Druid deck has a lot of very good matchups. Specifically, the Aggro Druid deck performs well against a lot of other aggressive tempo-oriented decks because it does have its own very fast openings, and it can play Galaka Crawler that actually synergistically fits into its game plan because it's a 2-drop beast. A lot of other decks end up sacrificing a lot to play Galaka Crawler, and also a number of interesting tech inclusions. The Crazed Alchemist, we saw that come up huge against Orange, taking out a Doomsayer against Orange's Jade Druid deck. So a lot of players, you know, they feel like Jade Druid is extremely strong. OmegaZero actually said he feels like Aggro Druid is the strongest deck right now.
Yeah, that took me by surprise, and it does have a couple of good matchups, you know, ironically enough, against Jade Druid. It does have a slight winning percentage, but it also is very competitive against Rogue. It's kind of an evenish matchup because of how good both decks are at fighting for early game tempo, and it'll depend on if OmegaZero can swing it with some of these other really big board builders. You saw one of them in South Sea Captain, but, you know, Crypt Lord can help lock a little bit out of it, and Living Mana is a card that Rogue just can't deal with it. Living Mana is just so powerful against the Rogue unless they build up a really big individual taunt that Druid can't get through.
And specifically, OmegaZero is even playing a version that includes Cobalt Scalebane, which gives him even stronger tools against Priest, for instance. We've seen that card be very popular fighting against Priests in a variety of decks, including one in Surrender's hand right now.
Oh, very timely.
Well, it's interesting because obviously Prince Kel'Thas is powerful to make your later turns very strong. But he's playing against a deck where what matters is right now. Against Aggro Druid, it's very important you're able to address your opponent's early minions for fear they get buffed by Power of the Wild or Mark of the Lotus. I actually would not be surprised to see Surrender just choose to use his dagger this turn rather than play Prince Kel'Thas because it's so crucial to remove your opponent's minions before they get buffed.
Yeah, so that's really good insight because, you know, what does Kel'Thas really invest into that would impact significantly the next draw versus losing the board?
Right.
Because right now, if OmegaZero gets a big wide buff with, you know, another minion on board and +1 across everything, that could spell disaster. And these kinds of very fast openings are on a knife's edge. You lose control even for a turn, and it's too late.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of options available to Surrender here. Even just playing the 2 1-drops may be more attractive than playing Kel'Thas. He is going to go with Kel'Thas, though. He decides, okay, I am investing in my future turns. I am going to run the risk of you potentially buffing up this board. He does, because he doesn't get the Kel'Thas on board, and he has removed the Divine Shield. It does mean that he has bodies on the board to help challenge OmegaZero's board here. Though the Druid of the Swarm is not necessarily powerful enough to really defend the rest of OmegaZero's board and give him even more buff. The Savage Roar here in particular in OmegaZero's hand is pretty weak. He'd love to have that much later, particularly in this matchup.
Well, Druid of the Swarm as a 1/5 is just annoying enough for Rogue to deal with, especially if they're coming up on turns where you kind of expect maybe SI7 agent or a few other things. Granted that it might be more likely that Surrender would have played SI7 agent the previous turn, so maybe that gives you more of an inclination to be a little greedier with how you value trade, for example.
OmegaZero here, you know, has a similar kind of decision here. He can choose to try to value trade a little bit here. One of the problems with value trading with with say his Raven and using his hero power and value to the Keliseth, well, you're playing as a rogue. They can just hero power you back. Yeah. You've really gotten very much nowhere. Playing the 1/5 taunt here helps defend things. He's actually is he gonna full trade here? Okay, interesting. So he decides that he's going to play around perhaps SI backstab to clear off the
right. Protect his 1/5 as best as can. Also happens to shut off any very silly things, like if his opponent draws like a shadow step and then like, you know, SI's that way.
Well, we were talking about what card could Surrender draw next turn that would make playing Keliseth really important that turn. One of those cards is, well, any pirate in his deck. The captain here, now potentially bringing out a 2/2 patches at this point. Not necessarily super impactful right now because there is the 1/5 in the way, but just getting all the body on the board. That many stats for 3 mana. 6 worth of stats for 3 mana is pretty huge. There is, of course, the threat of Galaka Crawler, though, that he has to be aware of.
Pretty interesting, too, considering that because OmegaZero made that trade, the patches won't actually kill it, right? Like, so then because OmegaZero protects it, maybe he gets a stronger buff on the board, or if he picks up Mark of Yashiraj, that's also another really good possibility, too. So OmegaZero, you know, playing with the range of his deck, not just the cards in his hand, and then on Surrender side, doing the same exact thing.
And look at Surrender here. He's choosing not to play the South Sea deck or the South Sea captain. He's respecting the threat of the Galaka Crawler. It may look like a really weird play to give up a possible 6/6 worth of stats here, but he thinks there's a very good chance there's a Galaka Crawler waiting in OmegaZero's hand. There isn't, though. So this hesitance may end up costing him.
OmegaZero doesn't actually have that great of a 4 mana play, but he can still use Power of the Wild this turn. I would be kind of surprised if he used Savage Roar really aggressively, but Power of the Wild, what it does do is kind of set up a sturdy enough board that Living Mana becomes a real threat. The real problem with Living Mana is if you can't even get to the small tokens, and then the ability for your opponent to not only push damage, but also get really good value trades if you're going wider onto the board as well. And then, of course, there's the threat of Mark of the Lotus. If you get that 1 mana buff, and all your 2/2s become 3/3s, that's almost game over for a lot of these kinds of matchups.
There's actually a couple of things to think about in terms of the use of Power of the Wild too. You could go for the 3/2, which would give him overall more stats on the board, but by buffing his minions, he makes it more difficult to attack into his Spider, or Scarab, I guess it is. The other one's the Spider, the poisonous one. And I think this ends up making his board line up much better against the potential minions that Surrender can deploy himself.
And I like this too, OmegaZero making sure to make Backstab kind of a useless card for Surrender, because we know Backstab is such a defining card in a lot of aggressive matchups.
All right, well, it's time for South Sea Captain. Yeah. And there's 2 things going on here. One, this now just will immediately kill the Scarab on the board. 2, Surrender is playing this captain into the 5 mana turn from OmegaZero, so if there is a Galaka Crawler in his hand, it's much less likely to be the most efficient play he can make. He's locking out the Living Mana and Galaka Crawler in the same turn, or the Scalebane as well.
Yeah, really good observation. Kind of like forcing OmegaZero to deal with it if he can deal with it. We know that he's just pretty much default locked into Living Mana unless he draws something else better. Also, something worth noting, Shadow Step doesn't keep the buff stats onto this badges. I've actually made this mistake very recently when I was first starting to play. Yeah, okay, sorry. It gets the buff from the South Sea Captain, but not from the Keliseth. So if you're calculating lethal in pinch scenarios,
is important to know.
Important to know. Wow, Mark of the Lotus draw, but he doesn't have that preemptive board to kind of protect his minions, and will guarantee you lose at least 1 with potentially, well, maybe more.
But this is not the sort of matchup that you can necessarily even wait. You know, OmegaZero, he has the Living Mana, he has buffs for it. He can't just say go here. I don't think. I don't think that he's in a position where he can just afford to give Surrender tons of time and try to build to a better Living Mana situation. His Living Mana situation is just going to get worse as turns go on.
Well, I mean, does he want to save it for next turn? Like Living Mana and then Mark of the Lotus?
You lose all your mana, so you can't cast Living Mana then Mark of the Lotus.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
You had to innervate to do that before.
You had to have innervate. So then, in this case, yeah, it seems like it's better to try and win the board, but OmegaZero, what is he going to do after that if he just loses a few of his minions here?
Well, there's the worst case scenario. I mean, the worst case scenario is somehow your opponent kills everything, kills you. I don't think that's actually happening here.
Yeah, he's at 31.
But realistically, you know, if Surrender kills one of these with his captain, and then say plays a scale bait, you know, it's obviously a pretty rough situation. But you don't have any better possible play here. By only killing one here, Surrender also potentially locks out the threat of Savage Roar coming from OmegaZero as well. So the worst case scenario is some sort of buff +1/+1 to the entire team.
Yeah, and there's also potential for Cobalt Scalebane to essentially do nothing. If you buff the South Sea Captain, that's the same kind of damage it would have anyways to trade into a token, and then you kind of lose the Firefly for free. And then all Surrender wants to do is stick a minion on board for the Bone Mare. As you can see, Ouya and Ye Tears, you know, both members actually of the Japanese community to some extent. Ye Tears is, of course, American, but he also identifies as a Japanese American. So kind of cool that they're also bonding. You know, HCT really bringing people together. All right, well, oh, interesting.
Huh.
Oh, that's so interesting. So that you can coin Bone Mare with that. You can play Firefly for 0 and Bone Mare off the coin.
Yeah. That's a very interesting play from Surrender.
Yeah, I haven't seen this before.
I also have not actually seen that play. So very heads-up play from Surrender, trying to ensure that even if this entire board gets cleared from OmegaZero, he's able to generate a massive board with the Bone Mare the following turn. That's an excellent play.
Yeah, and also the face attack too is something like kind of like subtle and in hindsight very obvious, but also another thing too. Don't give them Mana Crystal that they can't use otherwise. You know, then you give them the ability to have Power of the Wild or Mark of Yashiraj for a good trade.
Man, OmegaZero trying to figure out how best to navigate this. It's looking pretty rough though.
I mean, sometimes. Well, I mean, when you see that Shadow Step on the Firefly,
right,
and you know the opponent's on the coin, you know exactly what's coming next turn. You cannot stop the Bone Mare no matter what you do. So what is your answer in response? Is it to be aggressive right back? Is it to trade onto the board?
Looks like he's deciding, all right, well, this is what's going to be. I'm going face.
We have ourselves a good old game of chicken. Who's going to blink first?
There's 12 damage for Surrender plus 4 more from that Cold Blood, 1 more from the Hero Power. So no ability to generate lethal here, but yeah, it looks like he is going to be setting up that Bone Mare.
Yeah. And I mean, he's got 12 plus the 4 from the Bone Mare. Chooses instead to use the Firefly, so it seems like he's not going to be all out aggressive himself.
If he kills one of these, it opens up Savage Roar.
Yeah.
Which I believe ends up potentially being lethal, right? If he just kills one, Savage Roar means that, yeah, Savage Roar would end up being lethal because 1 plus the face could take out the taunted minion. So I believe he has to kill 2, and then the Savage Roar still kills him. I think OmegaZero actually has set this up to win the game.
Yeah, you
despite the Bone Mare.
Surrender's not playing. I mean, now I think he's calculating the Savage Roar, but this doesn't end up playing around it because OmegaZero has enough damage now, right? And has he even pulled his patches yet?
I believe there's still even patches in the deck. So I think that OmegaZero has far more damage than he actually needs here to close the game out. Just taking his time, doing the math.
Yeah, looks good to me. OmegaZero should be able to close this out with the Savage Roar, and Aggro Druid strikes back, being able to find that little weakness and pressure the life total.
And that's traditionally one of the things that you can do to just take down Rogue is put them to the test. They don't typically have healing. They don't typically have very many taunts. Even the Bone Mare, just with how much damage OmegaZero was able to push through, was not enough to slow his aggression.
All right, well, you know, I mean, OmegaZero is kind of putting a lot of the haters to rest with the Aggro Druid. Even though it did lose 1 game, it's won 2 of them, so it ended up holding its end of the bargain. We've seen Jade Druid perform kind of badly with 2 when people targeted. So I think Aggro Druid's kind of proven its worth a little bit so far for OmegaZero.
I am maybe a believer. You know, that deck, every game we've seen it operate so far has seemed exceptionally powerful.
I will say that the versions that some people were initially toying around were also kind of fun for me to play because some of them had originally Snowflipper Penguin put in instead of Innervate so that you can get beast synergies with like Mark of Yasharaj, and you can also get like 1 extra token in for the Savage or behind a Crypt Lord. It was really fun to play. I believe Icer was trying it out. And right now, OmegaZero is tied up the series 1 game apiece. So when we come back, we'll find out what's going to happen in this best of 5.
Gather round the fire, for there's a new tale to be told. This is the 2017 Hearthstone Summer Championship.
We're having a lot of fun here in the Summer Championship, but we also want to give a big shout out to the crowd that show up live here today. You guys are all awesome. I hope you guys are having fun as they're playing Hearthstone. They have their own quest log, even playing paper card games that look like Hearthstone cards. I kind of want to actually see what that's all about, because that looks like fun.
Yeah, sort of some sort of party game, Hearthstone theme. I don't really know exactly what it is.
Sure.
I haven't had a chance to play it, but I hope I will by the end of the weekend.
And I mean, it may be fun in games for us, but maybe not for these guys. OmegaZero and Surrender are deadlocked, 1 game apiece, as we enter the mid stages of this set of games here. If you're just tuning in, Surrender was able to strike first Murloc Paladin. A little bit unusual of a choice, given that it's got recently nerfed, but he got that win under his belt against the Hunter. OmegaZero then struck back with Aggro Druid, another unusual choice. And now we return to what could be a couple normal games here, depending on how the Hunter does. Do you think Hunter can get the win, though? I'm looking at the matchup spread. Hunter just looks even at best against some of these decks.
Yeah, Hunter seems like a pretty strange choice for this tournament to me from OmegaZero. It is a deck that, depending on its build, depending on the build of some of the decks you go up against, can be powerful, but it's extremely draw dependent. It really needs to have the right opening. Here, Alley Cat and a Crackling Razor Maw is a powerful one against Surrender's Jade Druid deck, but then Leash the Hounds is much less powerful in this matchup than it was in the Paladin matchup we saw before.
Oh, I think when we talked to OmegaZero, what it boiled down to was he expected a lot more people trying to go next level. He thought Big Priest, Quest Mage might be a thing. That's why he has Dirty Rat in his Priest builds, and that's why some other people did, like Pavel as well, to try and give them a fighting chance against some of these other decks that prey upon these strategies and try to do the Conquest target lineups. By having things like Hunter, it actually gives you such a strong win rate against those classes. And it's also not terrible against Jade Druid and Priest. Maybe that's the reasoning for OmegaZero, but still, it just hasn't worked out so far. And you kind of have to wonder, in the previous series against Orange banned the Hunter. Hunter didn't even get to see play. And now that Hunter's getting played, it hasn't won. So, well, we'll see if OmegaZero can get the win here.
Well, this is a matchup where Hunter can be pretty good, depending on the draw of the Druid. The Hunter can very easily just put enough pressure on the Druid early on that the Druid doesn't have time to ramp up its mana, play its powerful cards. Without Innervate and with the nerf to Spreading Plague, the defenses of the Druid are a lot weaker than they were before. So your just early aggression into burn plan is much more effective.
Surrender has 2 Jade Blossoms. Jade Blossom, the highest win rate card for Jade Druid in almost every matchup, as it tends to ramp both ways. Ramps your Jades, ramps your Mana Crystals, and does have the Jade Spear to traditionally follow it up. I guess the only thing the way is, how do you deal with the Hunter's board over time? How do you budget your resources and mana to account for maybe a swipe if your opponent starts building up big boards with Animal Companions and Houndmasters? That's when it starts getting really scary. You can survive an early Crackling Razor Maw, but when they start stacking all those things, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's when it starts getting dangerous.
Yeah, one of the scariest cards for Druid is actually just Scavenging Hyena, because it can get so big so fast, just attacking your small minions, turning them into big minions effectively. Also, Bear Shark. Bear Shark it's the real deal, man.
I know.
Can't be targeted by your wrath, by your swipes.
Yeah, I don't know. You've just been hyping Bear Shark almost as long as we hyped Surrender prior to his win. And, I've seen its power, specifically against Priest and Mage. I think Bear Shark is phenomenal. Against a lot of late game scenarios when you draw Bear Shark and it dies to like a simple Hellfire, like a Druid Malfurion attack, it just feels like, oh man.
Oh, it is much less powerful then.
Yeah.
I mean, you're playing Hunter. Your goal is to beat your opponent up early on, have minions that are difficult for them to remove.
Sure.
And that is something that Bear Shark can do quite well.
So, the Crackling Razor Maw here, just the play that pops up to us, I mean, heck, it's even outlined in orange to usually indicate that you can activate its adaptability. But OmegaZero is kind of, weighing, like, right now, like, what does Druid usually want to do on 2? And if I give him a chance to hero power, perhaps it gives him a target to use it for. But it's still the most powerful play. And I think Hunter usually tries to ignore what your opponent can usually do if you can go for a very strong proactive play.
This is actually a really interesting choice, because +3 attack obviously does the most damage right now, but +1/+1 potentially prevents your opponent from just wrathing it down. Wild Growth Surrender would love to play that this turn, but there's a lot of damage on the board already, so that Cycle Wrath may be almost demanded on the Ugly Cat right here.
Yeah, I mean, Wrath does cycle, and like you mentioned, you also get to take 4 damage off the board, but you have also so much ramp that you kind of want to get out of your hand too. But you're also not even ramping to anything defensive. Part of what used to make Jade Druid actually surprisingly good against Hunter in the mid stage of the game was the ability to ramp into Spreading Plague.
Yes.
In the past, ramping in this matchup as Druid was a death sentence. If you actually didn't want Wild Growth in your opening hand, one of the few matchups that was the case for Druid, because you lost so much tempo by doing so, you wanted Innervate, for example. Now, not necessarily the case since Knights of the Frozen Throne came out, and Spreading Plague has hit 6 mana, still very relevant in a matchup like this.
Yeah, Surrender definitely debating exactly how he wants to manage this. Wild Growth would give him access to 4 mana next turn. He can actually coin Wrath Jade Blossom to just get his ramp going.
Sure.
But he's going to be taking a lot of damage in the meantime. Kill Command, speaking of a lot of damage, that is potentially finishing damage OmegaZero picked up. He'd far prefer to have the ability to, say, play a Bear Shark this turn.
Okay, I'm sold. You got me. And I mean, Surrender also kept his options open, but just being able to swipe next turn.
Right.
If OmegaZero didn't have a 3-play, because he saw the first 2 cards that OmegaZero kept being played. He saw Alley Cat, saw Crackling Razor Maw. OmegaZero doesn't have a 3-mana play. He can set up for 4 with the Houndmaster, and then go wider onto the board with Firefly, or just simply Spaceman Hero Power. But I mean, the Fireflies, of course, make you hedge around swipe a little bit better. And this is a huge moment in this game right now. It might look kind of like not that important, but OmegaZero, if he loses the ability to use Houndmaster, that's a significant difference in power spike for the Hunter versus being able to land it.
Well, Surrender does have the swipe, so he's going to have the ability to clear off all of those beasts next turn.
It's also still a lot of damage against the Druid.
Surrender already down to 17. This is turn 3.
Yes.
For OmegaZero. Turn 3, he has dealt 13 damage already.
I mean, Surrender's already took 1 turn to play greedy. He accepted 8 damage guaranteed by Wild Growthing. I don't know if you want to be even greedier and let Houndmaster do damage to you.
I don't think you can. And yeah, he agrees. Swipes off most of this board. Still the Firefly and his pal Flame Elemental on the board. Crackling Razor Maw, another beast that would love to see a beast on the board.
Yeah. There's value in using Crackling Razor Maw with Unleash the Hounds. Sometimes you can use it as a poisonous way to get through a Jade Behemoth. You know your opponent's coming up on the coin, a powerful coin 6-play of some kind, whether coin Aya, coin Jade Behemoth, or in worst case scenarios, coin Spreading Plague. So there is value in holding on to it. So I think it's kind of hard actually for OmegaZero, because Tempo Houndmaster is also very suboptimal. It's a 4-mana 4/3.
Right. There is the option just of Razor Maw Hero Power. You have dealt a lot of damage in the early turns, so
okay, that's true.
Leveraging your Hero Power to try to just burn Surrender out. It doesn't matter how many big things or big taunts you get in the way, as long as you can chip them down. There's not that much life gain in these decks. There's essentially Malfurion and Ultimate Infestation in terms of ways to get yourself out of range if just damage comes in. And yeah, it looks like what OmegaZero is deciding to do. He wants to keep the pressure on with Steady Shot, also potentially set up a beast on the board, the Houndmaster, next turn. Compared to Tempo Houndmaster, this is just 1 less power on the board.
Right.
And he also gets the 2 damage in immediately, and potentially sets up for the Houndmaster the following turn.
Yeah, well said. And it actually compensates for that damage, because you actually gain +1 from that turn alone. And if you set up the Houndmaster, you lose another hero power, but you get the +2, so ends up netting you +1 overall. Mark of the Lotus is an interesting tech. I think a lot of people expect that in the aggressive druids, or even the mid-range token druids. You know, when you see Mark of the Lotus there, what's the role of that card in a Jade Druid?
One thing about Mark of the Lotus, I think it was mostly promoted by Zillet, actually, before the nerfs, in terms of giving you a way to improve the power of your Jade Spirit boards, your Mire Keeper boards, and against control decks, even your Spreading Plague boards. You know, Spreading Plague obviously is not particularly strong offensively, but if you happen to get a couple Spreading Plagues, you Mark with Lotus off, it can also just really throw off your opponent's ability to deal with your minions, say with Dragonfire Potion. If they expect your next Jade to be 5, suddenly it's 6. It's a very big difference.
It's true. And the +1 stat lines might give you the value trades, might keep you just alive a little bit longer. Also gives you a way to spend mana if you get like Ultimate Infestation. You still have like Innervate, for example. But that was prior to the nerf.
Animal Companion picked up from OmegaZero here. Is it always Huffer?
It's a good question. I ask that question every day.
Either Huffer or Leok are great here. Misha's probably the worst of them, given OmegaZero's hopes for this game to really just burn Surrender out.
Yeah.
But it's still a 4/4 beast. It's still a sizable minion that, if we look at Surrender's hand, he actually can't deal with right now.
Yeah, definitely suboptimal. I think he was okay with the other 2 choices, given that he can push his opponent to single digits if that was the case. You've seen Wrath and you've seen Swipe. And his opponent has up to 8 mana next turn.
One of the things that OmegaZero is definitely afraid of here is spreading plague. When you're playing Hunter, it's very important to, in many cases, consolidate your threats into a smaller number of minions because spreading plague lines up so incredibly well against so many of your threats. 5 health is so good against Misha, against Tuffer, against Houndmaster, against Bear Shark. So many different things that the spreading plague can really punish you for. So OmegaZero wants to trade here rather than push the damage.
It's a very subtle thing, because you might think, oh, that 1 damage is big. Hey, spreading plague and 5 armor.
Malfurion is absolutely huge here. Surrender could even play Malfurion, and if he wants, coin out the Mark of the Lotus to give himself 2 6s, which can give him a stronger defensive board. He doesn't necessarily need that, but it does prevent OmegaZero from on board being able to kill either of them, and just gives him that much more health and taunts right now.
It's not a bad idea considering that he's not, at least in our eyes, not holding on to the coin for anything special. And also worth noting too, Surrender's deck for Jade Druid has been teched more for the mirror. It seems like he has Medivh the Guardian as like some of his top instead of like Primordial Drake.
But this is huge because it's an immediate 5 health from the Malfurion Death Knight ability rather, plus the hero power now over countering, more than countering the hero power from OmegaZero. Plus now all the offense that OmegaZero had with these 2 minions is completely stalled.
Stalled is probably the best word to describe it because it's not going to stop if OmegaZero puts his Houndmaster on the board and gets to work. Surrender still has to deal with the board. He doesn't have direct removal, and utilizing your own health pool as removal is almost as dangerous as just armoring up.
The biggest issue here is really just the fact that the hero power from Malfurion now outpaces the steady shot from Rexxar. So rather than being able to just slowly chip away at Surrender, OmegaZero now needs to land solid threats and actually push for significant damage.
I mean, OmegaZero's got a lot of raw damage in his hand, and Unleash the Hounds continues to scale with more minions Surrender plays. Another good trader from OmegaZero, realizing he needs to restrict himself around spreading plague. Ultimate Infestation, and Surrender can ramp into it as well.
Yeah, the Jade Blossom this turn.
It's scary. There's a lot of damage on the board too.
There is, but if you just Jade Blossom and hero power for armor this turn, you put yourself at 16.
And
is that I mean, you're almost certainly surviving till the next turn, but if your opponent develops, say, a large minion on the board,
like the Savannah High Main,
right?
He's gonna go for it, and I like it because Ultimate Infestation is one of your outs. Savannah High Main comes into the hand for OmegaZero.
He would have loved to have had that last turn. He would have loved to have had just a huge minion in play, attacking right now. What can he do here? He has the Unleash the Hounds plus Bow or Kill Command. Unleash the Hounds allows him to clear through the Scarab with just one of the Hounds plus either his minions. Then he pushes 6 to face. His mana just lines up so awkwardly here because there's no combination that allows him to weave in the hero power plus 2 spells.
So,
I mean, it may be...
Sorry, I made the same noise as Rexxar while thinking about it. I'm trying to think if OmegaZero sets up as much minion pressure as possible, and his opponent Ultimate Infestations, like he plays like Unleash the Hounds or even Bow here, how much damage can he push, even if Surrender has Ultimate Infestation? And he should be able to get there because Surrender can't... Actually, no, because he can just use it on the minion too. So he goes up to 7, and then with Unleash the Hounds, he should be able to get there.
Yeah, I think this combination may work better than what I was looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Ultimate Infestation, one of these minions, he still has 7 damage available. He can trade into the other one. He can kill one, trade into the other. It leaves him with the weapon up, but there's still 2 minions in play. So he has Unleash the Hounds plus hero power, and I believe that will do it.
No, unless he trades his 2/2
No, he could actually trade his 2/2 in to prevent Unleash the Hounds from killing him.
If he plays around Unleash the Hounds, Surrender has to trade in his 2/2 and only let one Hound through, right? Because that'd be 6 damage.
Right, there's one Unleash the Hound in OmegaZero's deck. Surrender can choose to trade both of his minions, over-trade into this, to ensure he only has 1 minion in play. That will reduce Unleash the Hounds to only dealing 1 damage, so OmegaZero will be topped off at 6 he can deal next turn.
He's thinking about it too, because he's saying OmegaZero's been holding a card since the beginning of the game. And it's a situational card, and most hunters doesn't really run situational cards a lot of times. They like to play proactive cards.
He makes the trade. He keeps himself alive. They unleash the Hound. Galaka Crawler, that will not do anything. 1 damage off lethal thanks to that trade from Surrender. And now look at Surrender's hand. He has Spreading Plague. He has another Ultimate Infestation.
And he's got the tank up, rank up. Being able to hit that Malfurion hero power and gain 3 per turn will outpace OmegaZero.
If OmegaZero plays Savannah Highmane this turn, hero powers, he puts Surrender down to 5. Surrender can then trade his 5/5 in, Spreading Plague to make 2 minions, even both of them with Mark of the Lotus, so there's even more taunts in the way. And then OmegaZero, he can't even draw a kill command because of the hero power hitting faster than it.
I'm still blown away by the read. That's such a small thing to play around, but Surrender has checked every corner, swept under every rug. And is he about to stabilize, or will OmegaZero still get there? It's still really tight.
Yeah, the punch in here does mean that Surrender goes down to just 2. So there is still the opening. He can hero power up to 5, but there is still the opening for kill command to take over here. There's no way for him to remove this and gain enough life. Can take down the Highmane. Armor up, yeah. Definitely doing
that no matter
what.
what.
Let's do that first. We know it's happening.
Yep, Spreading Plague. Can Jade Idol and Mark of the Lotus. Actually has to calculate to see if he gives his opponent any outs by adding another minion to the board, because I think
there's only the one Unleash the Hounds in the deck.
Right. Does it add that? Is that 3rd Hound matter? And I don't think so. I'm willing to stand corrected here.
So OmegaZero has to draw kill command.
It's a Firefly.
That's about as sad as it gets.
But is there another way for OmegaZero?
He has 3 Hounds from Unleash. Those combined with his minions on board can still only remove 1 of these taunts thanks to the Mark of the Lotus as well.
Yeah, I'm starting to see the real value of the Mark of the Lotus there, because if OmegaZero drew Direwolf Alpha, for example,
sure,
the push through is a little easier in that case. I don't think it'd actually help in this scenario, but it's one of those things too to consider, like how Mark of the Lotus just puts things slightly more out of reach for your opponent's trades. You can hero power down Surrender to 3 health. He goes up to 6.
There is still the window.
There's still the kill command.
Though there is Ultimate Infestation in Surrender.
Oh, you're right, and he's safe behind taunts. And at this point, I think Surrender is 100% convinced that it's Unleash the Hounds.
Another Spreading Plague.
I mean, at this point, it's kind of luxurious, but every little bit helps.
Let's just reload after these die, in case that happens.
Yeah, if it dies. Right. Yeah. I think this first wave of Scarabs, or I guess the second if you count the Malfurion battle cry.
My thoughts are plagued.
So here, by casting Ultimate Infestation, Surrender gets himself out of range of Kill Command next turn.
Yeah.
So Kill Command by itself is no longer enough for OmegaZero to win the game.
And now Surrender has to just make sure to keep as much health onto his minions as possible. I mean, there is a kind of a weird scenario here, Kibler, and that's if OmegaZero gets Deathstalk or Rexar and starts getting ridiculously crazy Build-A-Beast combinations.
well, silence effects from Rexar
Yeah.
can potentially punch through the big taunts.
Silence effects, or even just direct damage effects too, like Dispatch Kodo, for example.
Oh, there it is, the bear shot.
Hey, you called it.
Like you were saying. Well, if that was on turn 3, this game would have not gotten to this point.
True, you're absolutely correct. It would have survived the swipe turn, would have pushed that damage, and OmegaZero would not be one-off lethal.
Yeah.
He'd also, if he got like Leok or the Huffer, he could have been. There's a lot of things that could have gone OmegaZero's way, but you also have to give credit to Surrender. He also played exactly into what he made the read of off of OmegaZero's hand, and now because of it, looks like he is a couple turns away from sealing this game out for good.
Yeah, he's just going to keep gaining armor with that Malfurion hero power, and OmegaZero, he cannot keep up. Steady Shot just does 2, gains 3, and there's no more burst armor gain for Surrender. Both ultimate infestations are gone, but look at his hand. He has enough tools to just make giant defensive minions with Jade Behemoth. He can just end this game offensively very quickly at this point.
I mean, he can end the game just by maybe 1 minion in hero power alone.
Yes.
And he can just get out of the range and fight for board. Hunter's never winning the board again for the rest of this game. And OmegaZero has to calculate how much damage he needs over the course of 2 turns. He's going to hang in there because, I mean, he's got a lot of life, so maybe Druid doesn't kill him, and then he can stabilize.
The saddest bear shark.
Hey, he's going to hang in there, man. Maybe even get a trade or 2 in. Surrender also has to kind of worry about extending onto the board.
I would expect what Surrender does here is just cycle through this, armor up with his hero power, play himself a Jade Behemoth to get more taunts in play, and then just, I don't think you even need to trade at this point. I think you can just push base. You're just setting yourself up to kill your opponent next turn. There's no way this bear shark, oh, he's actually going to trade, okay.
Just
you still have lethal, you still lethal
safe.
anyway. You have swipe plus your own hero power. And Bittertide Hydra also looks unimpressive, just like a bear shark at this stage of the game.
Okay, I can see it. Bittertide is as good as Bear Shark, confirmed, and OmegaZero is he's done. That is game 3 in the book. Surrender takes a 2-1 lead.
And really that game, that read from Surrender, recognizing the only way he could really lose there, or one way he could lose there, was the Unleash the Hounds. He has the absolute read that OmegaZero has it, navigates around it perfectly, and climbs back from the brink of death.
The stress is mounting. I mean, you look at the winner of that game, and he's putting his head in his hands right now. The tension is at peak heights right now. As we go to a break, when we come back, we're going to find out, can Surrender close out the series, or will OmegaZero make the comeback? this is the face of our previous winner. Or maybe Surrender forgot to turn off his faucet before leaving for Los Angeles. I don't know. But at this point, you can see the stress and the tension is at an all-time high right now for both of these players. As we go into game number 4, Surrender is currently up 2-1. 1 game away from going to the top 8.
Yeah, huge stakes for these players. A lot on their shoulders. Surrender trying to represent South Korea, an absolutely dominant country in the esports scene who does not yet have a representative at the World Championship. And OmegaZero looking to find himself the first Chinese player to push his way through to the World Championship.
Yeah,
as well.
and it matters a lot for these guys too when they say that. I mean, OmegaZero actually made a note to us that he primarily plays for himself. He recognizes there's a lot of pride of China on the line too, but he says he looks out for #1. But Surrender actually came out and said, you know, I actually really want this win, not just for me, but also for my fellow Koreans. And Kokasasa feels the same.
Well, it will be the Rogue for Surrender against OmegaZero's Priest. And Surrender is playing a fairly typical version of this Rogue compared to what we've seen sort of throughout the rest of the field. He is playing the Zaril Poison Mind, which is a card that we haven't seen too much of, but he has adopted the Karen Bloodhoof, which is a very powerful card in particular in this matchup.
So funny how old becomes new again with Karen Bloodhoof being cutting-edge technology for some of these Rogue decks. And Surrender will try to employ some of those tools to the best of his benefit. Cards like Zero, Poison Mind, and Karen definitely have their situational uses, but Karen really shines against Priest specifically because of its stat line. It just happens to be, it's actually really funny where, like, you know, you actually don't sometimes want Karen to be too buffed because of the threat of what it presents.
Right.
And then, you know, the Bone Mare possibilities after Karen gets played on the board.
It's just a 4-attack minion, not like this. That's pretty much what Karen brings out.
Yeah.
So you got 2 of them.
Yeah, but then there's also like funny scenarios where like Priest has Pint-Sized Potion of Madness, and they like steal Karen and then trade, and they get Bane Bloodhoof. So there's some really interesting dynamics that happen in the mid stage of the game, assuming players both have the resources.
Ooh, picking up patches on turn 2 here. Certainly not something I ever like to see.
Yeah, Patch is definitely not the ideal pick, but it does combo well with Edwin Van Cleef in the worst case scenario. So Surrender can figure out maybe a way to get a big Van Cleef up. OmegaZero is ultimately safe though because he does have that Shadow Word Death in his hand, awaiting any big target.
Against Priest, sometimes you don't even want to go big on Van Cleef. They do have Silence that can answer any size Van Cleef. Death can answer your very big Van Cleef. Sometimes against Priest, you just want to play a 4/4 because it's really only answerable by damage-based removal or Silence rather than Shadow Word Death.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of instances where my opponent played Coin on turn 2 and played a 4/4 Van Cleef, and that really gave me a hard time as Priest. I lost a significant amount of my health. And Rogue was able to pressure enough to always make me scared of dying because of how much life loss I had from that early play. So Accolade Pain looks like it's going to go uncontested here. Unless Surrender picks up something.
I would not be surprised if we just saw Shadow Step Edwin here. He just attacks, Shadow Steps his Firefly, plays the End as a 4/4, denies draw from the Acolyte, as well as gets the 4/4 Edwin down, which is, as we mentioned, that key size, which is so difficult for Priest to deal with.
That's a really cute play, and I like it. It does feel like you lose the Shadow Step value, but with the hand, the way it's currently looking, you're not gonna. There's not really much good Shadow Step stuff going on here, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, Surrender's hand is pretty poor right now. It looks like he's just gonna go with the backstab. With this, we'll give 2 cards over to OmegaZero.
Okay.
He does get to play his Van Cleef big if he wants. He could even try and make it really big if he decides to go in with Shadow Step into another minion. But that will run into a Shadow Word Death from OmegaZero, as we see.
Yeah, the 2 draws is so dangerous because Priest just needs to keep removing a lot of Rogue's threats. Rogue can't get there with just 1 or 2 minions.
All right, well, looks like Surrender is going big here. He wants the large Van Cleef.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, it's the least likely for your opponent to be able to remove it early game because they're not looking to keep cards all the time like Silence and Shadow Word Death, unless they have, you know, the utmost read on what your hand is. And OmegaZero does have a way to just completely shut that 8/8 down, and that completely gives a lot of Surrender's burst potential with having Shadow Step being used on a Van Cleef.
I must consider.
I'm not really sure what exactly OmegaZero is exactly considering, as Anduin's saying here, because he does have Shadow of Death that lines up perfectly against his Van Cleave, but working through both this turn and future turns, I have to imagine.
I mean, maybe it gives Surrender some false information on, like, he has Silence instead. If he deaths it, because then it's like, well, I could have used Silence, but I used Death. And now Surrender has to kind of play around the Silence if he wants to play Zero on board or something. I don't know. It's something that you don't have to immediately do.
Well, one thing, you definitely, you only have so much time per turn. And if you have potentially more complicated plays in future turns that you could have worked out on turns, you have easy decisions. Sometimes you get, sort of get that bonus time to operate there. Yeah. But there is the death that we all knew was coming. And Van Cleave is dead. And now Surrender has a pretty poor hand to put much pressure on OmegaZero at this point.
Yeah, at this point, I think from Zero, he's looking for the ability to draw a card and dig deeper into his deck. And this is why, we keep bringing up how some rogues favor card draw, like Tom60229 with his Curator and Cold Light Oracle packages. It really comes in handy against some of these priests that just drain you of resources.
So many wonderful poisons.
Oh, there we go.
Well, King's Blood is in fact the card draw poison, toxin.
Neat. Well, that gives some lifeblood to Surrender. By no means is it guaranteed that he's in the game, but it helps.
And this is the stage of the game where OmegaZero does have to be a bit afraid of Surrender's potential follow-up, because a Cobalt Scalebane on the next turn would be very threatening. He doesn't have any way to currently remove that. Surrender, of course, has a bunch of 1-drops in his hand. His 5-card hand costs a total of 5 mana, but OmegaZero doesn't know that. So, he wants to try and figure out what the best way maybe to even remove this board could be. He does have the Potion of Madness Spirit Lash if he wanted to actually just kill both these minions to prevent a multi-pronged Cobalt Scalebane being threatening next turn.
I think he can take it a little bit slow, given that he's got a lot of good resources. Interestingly enough, like the Cabal Song Stealer is not intended for this matchup at all. Oh, he ends up clearing it all. So he's definitely respecting the Scalebane here in this position.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's thinking about here, is because in particular he does have that Cabal Song Stealer in his hand.
Yeah.
If Surrender were to play a Cobalt Scalebane, it's just a 5/5 that goes up against my 5/5. Doesn't have anything on the board to buff, so doesn't really represent a significant threat at that point. Surrender now has 7 cards in hand. They cost a total of 7.
There you go.
At least he's consistent.
Yeah, and we'll see what the King's Blood picks up there. Perhaps Swashbuckler first to see if he can pick up an even better play.
All right.
More 1 mana.
Thematic.
Yeah. It's like the new Tavern Brawl coming out next week, I guess.
Yeah. His Clockwork Card Dealer got stuck.
Yeah.
He's just got one.
Well, what's funny is he can bounce that Swashbuckler again.
He can.
With Bloodthirst and maybe get another card. I mean, there's like some really wacky scenarios that can be created when Priest goes up against Rogue, because they both tend to be thief classes of stealing cards, built into a lot of the mechanics. So, what if Swashbuckler gets Mind Vision instead of Shadow Reaper Anduin?
Ruined the theme. It's all over.
Yeah, I don't even want this Valentine Slayer. It just ruins the theme of the party.
But now, actually, with Spirit Lash gone here, Surrender has a little bit of freedom to sort of spread out his board here and pressure with all these 1-health minions. OmegaZero has a board clear next turn with Dragonfire, but that is pretty heavily pressured in terms of being one of his best answers to a lot of the boards that Surrender can create. And now, maybe a couple card draw is perhaps in order.
Yeah, he can't really deny a Cobalt Scalebane from landing onto a minion here. So I think he's gonna go dig and see if he can find anything useful. Get your healing potion just for stall. And that Cobalt Song Stealer kind of sitting a little awkwardly into the hand here. And that's a card, again, OmegaZero very clearly trying to account for things like Quest Mage or any kind of control mage, because the Cabal Song Stealer not only silences, Acolytes and Doomsayer, but also unsilences your frozen minions to help push. And of course, the Dirty Rat that we mentioned is also in his deck. And it's not really helping out necessarily compared to being able to have a lot of good anti-aggro tools like Alkanite Soul Priest and Circle of Healing.
Mind if I roll need?
Well, Surrender not really pushing a ton of damage. Prince Keliseth, not so impressive at this stage of the game. He does have the ability to bounce it here if you were to choose to do so, but that's not that high of an impact minion to bounce at this stage of the game. A lot of players will just sort of snap Shadow Step Keliseth whenever they get it at any stage of the game. This may be a matchup where the game's going on long enough that the bounce effect on your Keliseth could be worthwhile. For instance, it gets his Bone Mares out of Dragonfire Potion range even more, I guess, because it already is for the first Keliseth.
Out of Thalnos.
Out of Thalnos Dragonfire. That's more meaningful. And it really depends on how valuable he feels that bounce is going to be. This isn't a matchup where bouncing Vile Spines is particularly powerful because there aren't generally that many big minions in play, but even bouncing a Bone Mare can be impactful later on to get another burst of damage at some point. Or Leroy as well, of course.
Leroy being the biggest candidate for bounce, considering that it can help win the game. And you mentioned Vile Spine Slayer, which might be more relevant. This year's even got Cabal Talon Priest. I feel like I'm looking at the very first versions of the Rizakis Priest, because they were playing cards like the Talon Priest to help secure early board. And they realized they don't really need that. They just need to draw a lot of their combo pieces.
Well, OmegaZero did get a little bit of information that he knows there's a patches in Surrender's hand, so he doesn't really necessarily fear a significant reload here because he knows one of those is a Toxin, he knows one of those is the patches.
That's right. Confirming stuff that he already knows. The patches comes out.
Interestingly, not bouncing his Prince and replaying it meant that he drew a 4/4 captain rather than a 5/5 captain that could possibly die to an Anduin.
OmegaZero finally can get use maybe out of some of these cards that have been sitting in his hand for a while. The Cabal Songstealer enables the Shadow Word Pain.
And what we're really seeing here is just Surrender has drawn so many of his low-impact cards through much of the game. There's Cairn.
Oh, he just used the silence too. His Cabal Songstealer. And here's also like a very inconvenient truth is that when you play 5-attack minions as the Rizakis Priest and you play Anduin, you also kill your own 5-attack minions too. So if you play Cairn, it kind of inconveniences your opponent enough. Oh, okay. So Surrender's going to play around the Anduin turn and just set up the Vile Spine Slayer. I like this too. Don't lose value if you don't have to. You have to squeeze every bit out of your hand that you can, considering that you're low on resources here.
Yeah, at this point, Surrender really needs to make the most of all of his cards because he is very low on resources here. OmegaZero, he has a whole hand to work with. Plays 3 this turn, going to develop a board that challenges what Surrender has in play. There's the Bone Mare.
Man. Yeah, this is what we wanted to see. None of these pathetic 1-mana cost cards just filling up the hand. Just the Bone Mares, and how does Surrender balance the Blood Thistle, bouncing back some of the other minions to his hand here?
Well, interestingly, does he have enough that he'd be 3 here? No, he's actually short because he could attack into the Talon Priest. Blood Thistle, bounce and kill the other minion, the Radiant Elemental, but then he can't follow up with Cairn because he'd be 1 mana short. So only reduces by 2.
And then, of course, we're talking about how Surrender was playing around the Anduin setup. Bone Mare always plays directly into it unless you had a 0-attack minion get buffed. So you have to always be mindful of it, and then that swing could also end the game for you. But you want to kind of develop onto the board here to threaten, otherwise Priest will just take it slow. Is he going to bounce? If you have Anduin, you have it. And OmegaZero has it. He can't wait.
The light has betrayed me.
Still no Raza the Chain playing though, so it's not like OmegaZero has this crazy powerful hero power that can be played and weaved in within every single card. This is still bad news for Surrender.
Cobalt Scalebane, though, is interesting. Cairn as well. He can play the Cairn, clear off one of the minions here. If he wanted to Blood Thistle and replay kill the other.
You can also hold on to it.
It's true. He doesn't
like
even necessarily need to use it here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're killing a cleric.
Yeah, at this point, your opponent doesn't even have the hero power to heal, so the cleric becomes much less impactful.
Now, this Karen's actually kind of problematic here for OmegaZero.
I'm a little surprised that OmegaZero did play the Northshire that turn, because A, it was challenged on board, B, he doesn't have the ability to heal to really take advantage of it anyway, but it can potentially reset his hero power for just 1 mana. So the body on the board feels like it's not doing a lot. I guess
Right.
I guess it was potentially challenging the Vile Spine,
player.
but at the same time, you just have the Anduin hero power to remove the low health minion on the board
Right.
anyway.
With the Northshire Cleric as a combo piece to enable that second hero power.
Right.
I'm kind of in your camp there. I'm not sure if the Northshire Cleric was absolutely necessary. Could cost OmegaZero maybe a card or two.
He does also have the Holy Nova in hand, so there's opportunities to actually pick up cards with that cleric. It really is a very strange decision to make.
Gets that 1 in, though.
He does.
I don't know. I think OmegaZero had quite the weak turn right now.
He did.
Surrender has an
Absolutely.
opportunity here, perhaps.
He's looking to dig with the Blood Mage here. But this is going to be pushing 5 damage, clearing off both of these minions.
Fireflies would play into a Northshire Holy Nova. But I guess Surrender just wants to push as much damage as possible now. Second Flame Elemental only adds 1 damage, but also gives range for potentially the second Bone Mare to have a guaranteed target in case the worst case scenario happens and his opponent clears the board.
And Surrender, I think, debating whether he wants to push the 5 damage to face or potentially defend his Firefly and prevent any kind of card draw. Nova. All right, well, there's no card draw at least coming from a Holy Nova here. Remember this game? This was the game where Surrender had 7 1-cost cards in his hand.
Right.
Where OmegaZero seemed to have everything.
Well, short of Raza, but yeah. It seemed like he had
All the tools to answer everything that Surrender was doing. It's true that OmegaZero never managed to find, or at least to this point has not managed to find, his key proactive cards. He's just been reacting to everything Surrender's been doing. But Surrender just was patient, didn't push out his hand too early, and now he's managed to find his power, and he's putting a lot of pressure on OmegaZero.
He could draw. He still can draw a card actually by attacking the Vile Spine and then Holy Nova.
True.
And then use the remaining 2 mana to use his hero power 1 more time and kill the Cobalt Scale Bait.
It does mean that he's not taking as much damage off the board, but perhaps that's not that relevant considering the life totals currently.
True.
He's still up to 27 here. He finds Raza.
Surrender's gonna go for it. He's seen Dragonfire Potion, seen Holy Nova, saw Spirit Lash.
He's got 16 he can push to the face this turn.
Yeah. I kind of like that for a priest that isn't exactly known for healing.
He does still have Leroy in his deck. He still has a Bone Mare, a Shadow Step. That if he does find that Leroy, can add more burst.
Yeah. He's got a handful of decent draws. He also got a couple of bad draws potentially as well.
There are a lot more weak draws in his deck than there are powerful ones, though, at this stage. And every card is so powerful for OmegaZero.
Kills off the Northshire Cleric. Well aware that he's going to lose most of his board this turn.
Choose soon.
Also important to note that I think Surrender also calculated possibility of OmegaZero killing him with like Mind Blast and Holy Smites, just in case.
Yeah, the Raza, though, suddenly the machine gun is online. Dirty Rat only pulls a weak minion, but crucially is also just a taunt minion to get in the way of any offense that Surrender tries to bring to bear.
I mean, Priest is in the last 7 cards of the deck here. Not really much left for OmegaZero to draw besides the Raza.
Leroy draw. He has 7 damage from Leroy after getting through the Dirty Rat. That's not enough. And that would actually, I believe, just leave Lethal available for OmegaZero next turn.
Yeah, there's not really much going on here. Surrender ends up passing, recognizing that he has the ability to maybe draw Shadow Step, but that's just going to be enough damage here from OmegaZero. And that is going to be a tied series. This game is coming down to the wires, both players being meticulous about their plays, roping even as early as turn 1. As we enter past the hour mark for this best of 5.
And now it will be down to OmegaZero's Hunter deck. It's the deck that is the most unique in his lineup compared to the rest of the field. He needs to take down the Rogue from Surrender, which is one of the decks that has really oppressed the Hunters from the representation on the ladder.
Yeah, it's definitely a deck that Rogue can capitalize upon significantly thanks to cards like Backstab, SI7 Agent, and the ability for them to fight for tempo very efficiently too. But at the same time, man, Hunter sometimes just finds a way. And I'm sure OmegaZero can attest to it. I'm sure other players can attest to it too. You talk to like Orange, for example. He used to bring Hunter in metas where people didn't play Hunter at all, and he'd still win tournaments with it.
Hunter, much like life, finds a way.
Just
it's always
finds a
there.
way.
It's The Crackling Razor Mod can win you a lot of games.
Yeah, that's right. So that's going to be Game 5, Hunter versus Rogue. And coming up after that, we have the winners match, the final match of the day. World champion Pavel looks to go to the top 8, up against Mexican representative Empanizado. And can he be the one who represents Latin America at the World Championships? We'd be the first person from his region to do that. That would be impressive and a huge landmark as well.
Yeah, we have never had a Latin American representative at the World Championship. Empanizado was a member of the Mexico HGG team, and says that experience gave him a lot of confidence coming into this event. But now, though, we have the final game coming up between OmegaZero and Surrender. China and the Asia-Pacific regions have been, so far, the regions doing the best in this tournament. So this match, the result of this game, will decide which of them takes the lead in this event.
That's right. Who's going to the top 8? Is it OmegaZero from China looking to put China one step closer to getting a spot in the World Championships from the season? Or will Korea hold strong and Surrender not only make his countrymen, teammates, and fans, but also himself proud of his accomplishments? Let's go into Game 5, Hunter versus Rogue. And we mentioned it at the beginning, and I'll mention it one more time. Stan Civka said Hunter is just not good to bring for this tournament. He said, OmegaZero is going to struggle a lot, and his prophecy rings true. Hunter is winless so far in this tournament. Can OmegaZero grab that W?
Well, this is a very good hand from Surrender. Strong one from OmegaZero as well. He does have the 1-drop into Kindly Grandmother, one of his better 2-drops, but Surrender has 1-drop into SI Backstab, which is just a combination that can allow him to very readily seize the board.
That's right. And it's also a matchup where having the coin is relevant too, because Rogue likes to combo. So if for Surrender need to backstab on turn 1, he could then coin SI7 Agent instead and not have to pair those things together.
OmegaZero in the tank. Once again, we've seen him take his time on even turns where he has pretty clearly one decision, but I think here he is mapping out the early turns. What is my plan? If I do this, my opponent does this. If my opponent has a 1-drop of their own, how am I going to respond? And Surrender, though, another SI Agent. Wow. And this means he has access to coin SI Agent and backstab SI Agent the following turn. Can just absolutely slaughter the early game from OmegaZero.
Yeah, that could be backbreaking. The fact that you kind of get like such big tempo swings that just decide the early game, and then Hunter has to fight from behind the rest of the game, which is not what it's good against. And guess what? Tempo Rogue excels, specifically when it has a minion. And in fact, both these decks actually function very similarly, where they try to use early game tools to fight for board control and then snowball that by adding damage every single turn and removing your threats.
And that's one of the reasons that, generally speaking, the Rogue tends to come out ahead, because it is better in a number of ways at snowballing early advantages. It has a better hero power for fighting for the early board. It has access to cards like Backstab and SI Agent. And here OmegaZero recognizing, okay, the most important thing is just holding on to this early board. If he did play Kindly Grandmother there, he would leave himself in a position where his opponent could just bump it with his Firefly and use either Backstab or SI Agent to remove it. Now it will at least be a Firefly left on the board here. Can't even Backstab. Still, though, OmegaZero not really in a position where he can take advantage of this. He doesn't have a bow here, which would be his best tempo development in this board to shut down the SI.
Do you know what he does have, Brian Kibler, on turn 3? the ever so magical and omnipotent bear shark.
I never said it was good in this matchup.
It's I mean, hey, your opponent can't like backstab it, so
Imagine if that bear shark were something else and just got SI backstab.
Yeah, like
at least it can force a trade here.
Animal companion.
At least force a trade.
You're actually right. In this case, what does Surrender want to backstab? His own minion?
I mean, ultimately, this is actually pretty good for OmegaZero. The fact that this is a bear shark, because now what's Surrender doing? He's not playing an SI. He's going to play Flame Elemental, dagger down the Flame Elemental. It's a much better position for OmegaZero than if he played a different 3-drop minion. So yeah,
you're such a
bear
troll,
shark's
Brian.
great.
Go away. Get away. It does end up working out coincidentally good against that specific combo hand, yeah. Kraken Race Maw going to come down and see what's behind the adapt.
The Death Rattle is pretty attractive here.
You just want to fight for board.
Well, there's no AoE clears available to Surrender in this tempo rogue deck. So cracking open this Kindly Grandmother will leave quite the board available. He does have backstab SI, he can clear off all the big things, but there's at least 2 minions that survive left of the board.
Yeah, but the big thing for OmegaZero, no beasts.
So the dagger will clear the last one. Yeah, so this is now, despite having a quality death rattle from that, OmegaZero, now look at his hand too. He has a Flame Elemental, okay. He can bow down the SI and develop a bit with Flame Elemental plus the Alley Cat he just picked up. But the rest of his hand is pretty weak, while Surrender is actually getting into these power tournaments where he's starting to drop big minions.
Well, I mean, he's going 2 for 1 with a lot of cards. And now we're just kind of in a good old-fashioned Hearthstone game where one player has significantly outvalued the other and kind of puts the onus on the player that's behind to make a big power play, because Surrender's just going to be dropping big bombs.
That said, though, OmegaZero, he has this wide board thanks to the plant as well as the Alley Cat. And now, Surrender, he's just going to keep taking damage from these minions, potentially. He doesn't have currently a Bone Mare. Well, now he picks up a Tar Creeper, so that does make things much more attractive for him. It even has the Cobalt Scalebane potentially this turn, followed up by Shaku plus Tar Creeper next turn. Or potentially just Dagger, Tar Creeper, or Shaku this turn, clear some things out.
It's the raw Cobalt Scalebane. OmegaZero picks up a second Eagle Horn Bow. That is not what he wants to see.
Not all, because it's actually almost a blank turn. He can attack with his weapon, reset a bow, but he's not actually doing anything that impacts the board this turn. And yeah, he's going to have to trade into this, clear it off the board, reset his bow, hero power, but now he has just 1 power in play, and Surrender's going to get to multi-develop minions here.
It's looking worse and worse with each passing turn. Surrender is at a higher life total, despite the fact that OmegaZero's gotten onto the board faster. And even just this Tar Creeper locks out most of OmegaZero's options here. Considering that a Flame Elemental is all that he has.
It's kind of an interesting decision between Shaku and Van Cleef. Yeah, he decides to just go with Van Cleef here. He wants to have the biggest minion to close the game out quickly, as well as potentially challenge anything that OmegaZero does play. Houndmaster, there's Unleash Houndmaster, so he can at least clear things off and get a 3/3 taunt that will absorb at least some of the Van Cleef here, but
I think OmegaZero's best chance is Deathstalker Rexar here.
Oh, Bone Mare. Is that even good, right?
I think his best chance here is Deathwing. No, wait, he has a Valspine Slayer.
Yeah, I think Bone Mare here just lines up great. You end up with a giant taunt minion, shake of the head from OmegaZero. Neither of his effects on board can clear this immediately either. He has to attack both his minion and his face into an 8-attack minion, and now he plays a Bittertide Hydra while at 11 life.
Well, his opponent also has Valspine Slayer, and if his opponent's able to get a couple of chargers, that also could just be lethal. This spells the end for OmegaZero in this best of 5. Surrender is 1 turn away from going to the top 8.
Highman is not it. And there it is. Surrender will move on to the elimination rounds very, very soon.
Surrender will go on and play into the top 8 and see if he can get his World Championship berth. And what a back and forth series. We saw a lot of things come into play. First, we saw the preparation. The Hunter come into the series with a big question mark there, and it didn't come through at all. Then we saw some really high-level reads going on back and forth, where Surrender, just by the skin of his teeth, was able to survive a Hunter push in his Jade Druid matchup and was able to win. Surrender will win the group, and OmegaZero will also play in the decider match tomorrow, but boy, was that a fun series to cast.
And we say that the Hunter kind of got run over. It was all 3 of the losses for OmegaZero, but that Jade Druid game was so close. For multiple turns, he was a single damage away from being able to win, but Surrender's play just locked him out.
I'm curious what he's thinking. Let's hop on over to TJ, who's with Surrender now.
Thanks very much, guys. That's right. I'm on stage with Surrender, the winner of that last match. And first question I want to ask, OmegaZero bringing the only aggressive lineup in the tournament. How did you feel going into the match?
그 오메가제로의 그 공격적인 덱에 대해서 싸우는데 어떻게 생각했어요?
처음에는 되게 당황했었는데 그 팀메이트들이랑 연습하다 보니까 상성이 의외로 괜찮더라고요. 그래서 연습해보고 나서는 괜찮다고 생각했어요.
First, I was very nervous, but as my teammates helped me out and we researched, we found out that there were certain favorables, and so we did our homework.
So now you're into the quarterfinals, 1 match away from qualifying for the World Championship. Are you nervous? What's going through your head right now after that win?
이제 4강에 이제 한 경기만 남았는데 지금 마음이 어떻게 생각하세요?
일단 연습실로 돌아간 다음에 제 상대들이 아직 안 정해졌잖아요. D조에서 파벨 선수가 제발 이겨라 하고 응원할 겁니다.
So now I'm going to go back to my player practice room, and as I know, like I have been facing against the D group, and I'm just hoping that Pavel wins.
All right, well, that's going to be a tough road ahead of you, but I want to ask you one question here. A lot of viewers in the chat think you're a pretty cute guy. What do you have to say to that?
뭐좀 그 채트에서 많이 본 건데 그 많이 귀엽다는 그 답글을 받았는데 어떻게 생각하시나요?
저 사랑해 주시는 분들이 많으면은 저는 그 자체로 좋은 것 같아요.
I'm really grateful that a lot of people think that I am cute. Thank you.
And one final question to wrap things up. Do you have any messages that you'd like to give to your fans or people rooting from you back in Korea?
그 한국에 있는 그 시청자나 그 가족이나 한마디 소감 한번 부탁드립니다.
다른 것보다도 제 연습 상대를 해준 팀원들한테 가장 도움을 많이 받은 것 같은데요. 팀원들한테 고맙다는 말 하고 싶습니다.
I think I would not have been able to do this without my teammates, and I would like to give my thanks to my teammates.
Awesome, great to hear. Thanks very much, congratulations again, and we'll see you on Sunday for your quarterfinal match. Let's send it back over to the desk.
Surrender, OGN champion, top 8 finisher, guaranteed in the Summer Championship, and also Heartbreaker. Wow, great interview, TJ. Couldn't have said it better myself.
I do want to point out that when we talked to Surrender before the tournament, he said that he was far more nervous for the interviews than he was for the actual gameplay. And here's TJ tossing the really hard questions of, what do you think about people thinking you're cute?
That's right, man.
That is a tough
Asking
one.
the hard question.
It's a real tough one.
All right, well, we are done with 3 winners match. We have 1 more match to wrap up day 1 here at Summer Championship, and you're looking at them right now. We have world champion Pavel, realizing the camera's on, sit up straight, man. And then you have Empanizado from Mexico looking to also upset. That's going to be happening as the final match from Group D for day 1. Then we'll find out what happens tomorrow with the deciders and the lower bracket matches. We've had a lot of fun to wrap up the 7th match of the day. A lot of ups, a lot of downs. And in the end, Surrender came out ahead 3-2 to qualify for the top 8. When we come back, the final best of 5 between Pavel and Empanizado.